Hey patients, Dr. Epic here back with another medkit for you. Today I was thinking about one of my favorite game franchises, and one of my favorite games in that franchise, Battlefield's Bad Company 2. That game is a masterpiece and featured one of the most unique things in a Battlefield game, a really amazing campaign with a really good adventure story. Fans of this game might wonder, what happened to the story? What happened to Bad Company? What happened to the scalar weapon? That's why I wanted to today talk about Battlefield's lost story, Battlefield Bad Company. Starting with Operation Aurora. First off, thank you for clicking. Battlefield, in its inception and early days, was never mainly about campaign and story. Battlefield 1942 and Battlefield 2 didn't have a single player story, at least not in a recognizable form as most big mainstream games have today. The Bad Company series was DICE's first explicit and earnest attempt at creating a single player story in addition to a solid multiplayer experience. It goes without saying, for those who know, that they succeeded brilliantly with their first real attempt, Battlefield Bad Company 1. They would continue the campaign success with Bad Company 2 having, in my opinion, Battlefield's best campaign. Now, Bad Company 2 starts off in World War II on a secret mission in Japan. This is back in the day where secret missions were really secret. No GPS, no drones, and no surveillance cameras. If an operation went sideways, odds are you might never know what happened to those involved. World War II really was the start of special forces and special operations more than any other war in modern history. The British saw the need for special forces already in 1940. Winston Churchill wanted specially trained troops of the Hunter class who can develop a reign of terror down the enemy coast. You could also say the Axis had their own special forces, such as the dreaded SS units. The Americans also saw the use for special forces, leading to the creation of the Office of Strategic Services. Formally, in June 13th, 1942. The OSS would later, after the war, transition into becoming the CIA and the Bureau of Intelligence and Research, both still active today. OSS functions during World War II included the use of propaganda, subversion, and post-war planning. The OSS employed almost 24,000 people in their prime during the war and included people from all walks of life, as shown in this CIA clip.
OSS operatives had backgrounds ranging from academics to entertainers, to circus performers and even swimmers and safecrackers. OSS officers underwent vigorous training in guerrilla warfare and new cloak and dagger combat methods such as espionage and lethal covert action. The training process to become an OSS officer was not easy or conventional. With the outbreak of World War II, President Roosevelt looked to new techniques to take the fight to the enemy. OSS training did the trick.
The OSS also engaged in violent and covert operations behind the enemy front lines, as you can see. Among these activities were training anti-Japanese guerrilla movements in Asia. It is clear that the squad of Bad Company 2's Operation Aurora was inspired by the real-life OSS activities. And unlike the mission Nordlys in Battlefield 5, it was respectful to its real-life roots and inspiration, even though the Operation Aurora mission is somewhat fantastical in regards to its objectives. Just to get it out of the way, Battlefield 5's mission Nordlys was the biggest nut slap to us Norwegians from Sweden since they refused us our own foreign consular services in 1895 and 1904. But let's move on from the Norway-Sweden beef and focus on the topic of the video. So let's talk more about Operation Aurora. In the game, Operation Aurora became a myth in the US military after its failure. The goal of the operation was to retrieve a Japanese defector with intimate knowledge on a highly secret Japanese superweapon project. We know that the US squad managed to retrieve this defector by staying quiet and using their special operations training and expertise to their full extent. There were instances when all-out open fire combat occurred between the Japanese soldiers and the Americans, and the well-trained squad managed to prevail even then. The squad was under time pressure as well, due to an incoming, larger US invasion. The squad managed to utilize the chaos to their advantage, however, and proceeded to escape the island by hijacking a Japanese submarine. Any well-earned celebration was, however, cut short, as the Japanese decided to fire the so-called Black Weapon. The Black Weapon had been charging up throughout the entire operation, something that the defector had warned the US squad about. the defectors' fear foreshadowed the unprecedented events that followed upon the weapon's activation. A terrifying sound washed over the island and nearby waters, followed by a massive, radiant blue particle storm engulfing the entire area, creating a water wave that would presumably lead to the death of our special forces, as well as the US invasion force in its entirety. What had just happened? The black weapon had been fired. But what exactly is the black weapon?
This is a scalar weapon.
Beautiful, isn't it?
But you can't be serious.
You never heard of Operation Aurora?
Well, yeah, I have, but look, even if you could produce a scalar field.
First, to be a localized Carrington event in the troposphere.
Stop. In English.
Right, a scalar weapon creates very powerful electromagnetic pulses.
So
they trigger it in the right spot, down goes the US power grid. Then as our fine country slips into total anarchy, the Russians decide to come knocking. The end.
The black weapon is described as a so-called scalar weapon. In Battlefield Bad Company 2, this works as an electromagnetic pulse bomb. This means it devastates and neutralizes all effective electronic equipment. In the modern age, this turns an entire situation upside down due to the heavy amount of electronic technology used by both civilians and military personnel, from communications to larger weapon systems. What makes the scalar weapon more dangerous than a traditional EMP effect from a traditional nuclear bomb is that the epicenter, in Bad Company 2 at least, seems to remain intact. Something which certainly isn't the case with the detonation of nuclear weapons. The strategic possibilities and implications of this are massive. I assume you could use the scalar weapon as a sort of missile shield or trophy system against incoming electronic controlled missiles, such as nuclear missiles, allowing you to effectively negate the threat of mutually assured destruction. This could allow you to invade a country with a small army within the weapon's epicenter. This way you cripple the defending force while keeping your units electronically intact and in charge of a massive advantage. In Operation Aurora, we could see the weapon also creating some sort of shockwave leading to the massive water wave. When the Russians developed the scalar weapon further throughout the rest of the game's story, they seem to have managed to remove this effect. This makes the weapon less destructive, but in return, you keep more infrastructure intact and you can keep your troops in the epicenter safe and dangerous. The black weapon, or scalar weapon, had only been fired 2 times in history as far as we know. Once during Operation Aurora in 1944, and once during a test fire in South America by Russian forces led by Colonel Kirilenko. The Russians intended to fire it a 3rd time, this time above American home soil, in the state of Texas.
We're in Texas, home sweet home!
Bad Company managed to stop this activation by presumably destroying the weapon, and in doing so, presumably stopped a southern land invasion by Russian forces. The reason I say they presumably destroy it is because in-game we see that Marlowe stops it by flinging some pistol rounds at it. This causes the weapon to tear a massive hole in the plane, taking the weapon with it. The plane proceeds to crash in the Mexican Gulf according to the Battlefield Wikipedia. As many of you know, this is sadly where the Bad Company story ends. There never was released a Bad Company 3, continuing the story and explaining what happened to the scalar weapon. There has for every subsequent game been speculation that the next game would be Bad Company 3. After Battlefield 5 there was perhaps more than ever hope for a Bad Company 3, since people had grown tired of World War I, World War II gameplay and yearned back to modern times. Seeing the state of Battlefield 2042, I for one am glad they didn't try and fail to make Bad Company 3. It seems with this game that they are back to multiplayer only focus in Battlefield 2042, just as it was before the Bad Company series started. How likely is it that Bad Company 3 will be made? Is it likely at all, or is it another Half-Life 3 situation? As of today, there is no concrete hard-hitting evidence that Bad Company 3 is in development and likely to happen. The Bad Company games are apparently set in an alternate universe and are their own 2 self-contained stories. Battlefield 3, that in the real world followed Bad Company 2, is a sequel to the OG Battlefield 2, not Bad Company 2. This further removes incentive to tell stories in the less fleshed out Bad Company 2 universe, since Battlefield 4, Battlefield 2042, presumably Battlefield 2142, Battlefield 1 and Battlefield 5 all happen in the other universe, the non-Bad Company universe. The core of the Bad Company series is, well, you guessed it, the Bad Company.
And you too. You listen to Marlowe and you listen good. Come on now. Sweets, this is interesting stuff, man. Don't you want to know how this ends?
You had me at interesting.
Hags, come on now. If you leave, no more T-bone steaks, man.
Yeah. No more buying AR-15 ammo at the mall.
No more shooting trespassers on your porch.
No more biscuits and gravy.
No more Super Bowl Sundays. No more Dallas Cowboys cheerleaders.
Shit. That's Tor. Get out of the way! I gotta save me some cheerleaders.
This squad of lovable misfits consists of Preston Marlowe, voiced by David Menken, Sergeant Samuel Redford, voiced by Bruce Lester Johnson, George Haggard, voiced by Nigel Whitney, and Terence Sweetwater, voiced by Richard Linson. It would be key to bring these voices back for a third installment, if it were to happen. You could of course find impersonators like they did in Call of Duty Black Ops Cold War, and I wouldn't be super opposed to that, but it's hard and a little unethical to replace perfectly good voice actors and fan favorites. A lot of times I think replacement is done to save money, because the agents or whatever of the actors demand more money since only their client can give the performance they're after, if they really want the OGs. In regards, however, to the traditional voice actors of Bad Company, David Menken seems to still be active, working, lastly spotted in 2022 in the game LEGO Star Wars, the Skywalker Saga. Even though we both are Norwegians, and this is a small country, I'm sad to report however that I have not encountered him in the wild, but according to IMDb he is at least still alive. Bruce Lester Johnson was last spotted in 2018's Ready Player One, most likely cast as Sergeant Redford, I hope. So he seems to be active. He is however born in 1959, meaning he could be approaching his mid-60s at this moment. I reckon therefore he might be looking at retirement soon, sadly.
I think you gotta ask Marlowe here. Thanks to him, I'm officially retired.
That will be a sad day, due to his amazing voice. But hey, they say 64 is the new 54, which means that 54 is the new 44 and so on and so on. Either way, EA, DICE, please get off your glutes and beg to hire this man back. Nigel Whit was last spotted in the TV series The Way Home in 2023 and also served as a voice actor in Cyberpunk 2077 in 2018, and in 2022 he voice acted for both Dying Light 2 and, when you know it, LEGO Star Wars The Skywalker Saga. I hope Nigel and David teamed up and did some, I don't know, C4 Jeep tricks in the studio together for old Battlefield time's sake. Clearly, Nigel is still very active, though also having just turned 60 this February. The last one for the squad, Richard Linson, is... uh-oh. The only good thing that makes Bad Company 3 likely is that DICE and EA is right now in serious need of some good PR in regards to the Battlefield series, and a good launch of Bad Company 3 would go a long way. This is, however, sadly, pure speculation. The Bad Company stories were so good, the scalar weapon arc in particular I really liked. It would be sad if this story thread remained untied. It's a tough spot as a fan, wanting to make demands and wishes. On the one hand, I want them to give this to us fast before it's way too late. On the other hand, I don't want them to ruin it, you know? If they decided to make the next game Bad Company 3, it could either revitalize the entire franchise if they nailed it, or it could bury it if they slaughtered it. In conclusion, I don't think it's likely to see Bad Company 3 in the near future, or ever. However, now would perhaps be the perfect time to bring it back, though we have said that before. As of now, Bad Company is still on their Humvee trip to Alaska. The scalar weapon is still resting at the bottom of the Mexican Gulf, presumably destroyed, we don't know. The story rests safe and undisturbed in a parallel universe. Seeing how our universe is currently doing, it might be for the best, remaining a unique Battlefield gem, unscathed by time and microtransactions. But I do hope that we see this lost story again. Until next time, this is Dr. Epic signing off. If you subscribe, I will give you a medkit during the next rush match of Isla Inocentes.
Go down in the valley of time, talking about time when the sun, yes, the sun.
You're an Afro-American. I'm just wondering. I don't want to insult you, but Aguirre is not an African name, is it?
What the fuck are you talking about, Hags?
I'm just saying the man's name. It doesn't sound like it's very African.
We're not in Africa, Haggard. We're in South America, Bolivia. Did you ever see Butch and Sundance? You know, Robert Redford and Paul Newman?